All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show, your one-stop shop for all things Commanders. Usually inside the command centers are on a Friday. We've got a Thursday night game today, so we've changed up the schedule just a little bit, help us get prepared for the game tonight. From Philadelphia is Chris Russell from the Team 98 Rooster. What's happening?
Hey guys, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Chris, this is one of those games where it feels like it's not a must win since it's in Philadelphia, but boy, this one would feel good.
Yeah, so on the show that I just got done doing on 980, we asked if it's a must win, a should win, or a very little chance to win. And I said, I'm a little less than should win. But if I had to pick one of those, it's a should win as opposed to a must win. Now, the one thing I would say is, if Philadelphia wins this game, which I think is most people's expectation, but not all, they would be 8-2. Washington would be 7-4. So obviously you have a game and a half difference there because Washington has played one more game, but then you also have the head to head in favor of Philadelphia. So I don't want to say the division would be locked up. By no means it's not, but that's a pretty hefty hurdle to climb. And that's assuming that you beat Dallas next week at home. That's assuming that you beat Tennessee at home the week after that. That's assuming after the bye you go to New Orleans and beat the Saints. And, maybe the Saints are reborn a little bit here under Darren Rizzi. We don't know. I don't think there's any definites. And that's all before you get to that Christmas or before Christmas matchup, I should say, with the Eagles back at Northwest Stadium and then Kirk Cousins and the Falcons. So again, you'd have to do a lot of work to overcome a loss here tonight.
It's you mentioned most of the games we have coming up, but also, I mean, we're looking at an Eagles team that's got the Rams, the Ravens, the Steelers, us. I won't conclude the Cowboys and the Giants in that conversation, but while our schedule, I think, is more favorable than theirs,
Yep.
certainly. So, again, it would be nice to grab this one. It'd be nice to grab this one because it's prime time more than anything, but it's on the road, not at home. So it feels like this is way more must win for them than it is us.
I mean, yes, I guess because if you look at them being favored at home, and the perennial, you know, kind of playoff contending, playoff winning type team, even though they've been messy at times, certainly the second half of last year and the first part of this year, of course, they're riding a 5 game winning streak. You have to kind of question, how good are they during this 5 game winning streak? Because they haven't beaten a lot of great teams, right? And they've struggled with some of the poorer teams, quite honestly, at this field, at Lincoln Financial Field. They barely beat Jacksonville, or they barely hung on to beat Jacksonville. And Sirianni made some questionable decisions there that hopefully he'll make tonight. Maybe the Commanders can benefit. And then they barely beat the Cleveland Browns, who the Washington Commanders smashed. Now, again, that doesn't tell you everything because then they went and beat Cincinnati by 20 on the road, a spot where Washington did win, but by 5. And they did smash the Giants, again, a spot that the Washington Commanders just won at, but kind of hung on. So, like, when you balance it all out, I think both of these teams, you can say there's a question about how good they are because they haven't beaten the upper level elite. I guess you would give a tip to the Eagles because they did beat Green Bay and Brazil, but then they got smashed on the road in Tampa when Tampa was still a really good team. So again, you balance it all out and you say, well, what are they? Well, here's what they are. They're red hot right now. They're at home. They probably should win this game if they execute right. But I don't know about you guys. The last time the Commanders played a primetime game here 2 years ago, mid-November, the Eagles came in, 8-0 or whatever it was,
Yes, it
and
was.
Washington forced 4 turnovers, and that's how they won. And, guys, I think 3 turnovers, 3 takeaways is really the key tonight. As generically as I can make it, 3 takeaways is really the key.
Absolutely. Chris, you brought up a good point. The Eagles are running a 5 game winning streak, playing questionable competition, but they have won 5 straight games. Their defense has looked pretty strong for the most part against weaker competition, potentially. Conversely, Washington, the offensive production has gone down a tiny bit over the past couple of weeks against the Eagles, the Bears, and in a pretty good game against the Steelers. Is there a reason for what do you attest to the offensive regression potentially? And is there a reason for concern going into the Eagles game?
I think there is concern. I think concern is valid, and that doesn't mean that we don't believe in Jayden Daniels or believe in Cliff Kingsbury or same old Commanders or same old Washington or same old Cliff or now he's hitting the rookie wall. And I think there is some element to all of that, but not a strong element, at least in my eyes. I think part of it is, of course, against a really good defense. You didn't have Robinson, you didn't have Andrew Wiley, and Brandon Coleman struggled a little bit, as we all kind of expected. And Biotish was banged up during the game, went out, came back in. Who knows how effective he was? Even Sam Cosmi, I thought, struggled a little bit from time to time. Again, that's going to happen against elite defenses. Are the Eagles an elite defense? I don't think they're an elite defense, but they are getting better and better and better and better with young guys on the back end. And obviously, when you look at what they have on the defensive line between Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, it's going to be tough to move the football inside zone, inside running. So I think they're going to have to attack the edges, maybe a Bryce Huff, run at him, try and soften him up. He's not known as a great run defender. Try and get out to the perimeter. I want to see more natural running back screens. They didn't do that enough for me last week. And try and take advantage of some of the things that maybe can get Jayden into a rhythm early. And with B-Rob back, stay ahead of the chains, which they weren't able to do last week. 5 3-and-outs. And more importantly, like Cliff, it's okay if you take a -1 run or a no-gain run on first down. Don't be so analytically scared that you're going to, just have to throw the football every first down and not going to be able to run. I think the key in this game, and I'm sorry this is a long answer, is, if you can run at least 30 times, even if it yield great results, even if it yields, let's just say 110 yards on 30 carries. Guys, to me, that's such a key because it keeps the Eagles, somewhat in check off the field, and it makes Jayden's job easier, and it makes the offensive line's job easier.
I mean, how big is it, Chris, to have Brian Robinson Jr. back for this game? To me, Jayden Daniels might be the gas pedal, but to me, Robinson Jr. is the engine that kind of gets this thing moving.
Yeah. So, on the show today, we kind of opened up talking about the importance of Brian Robinson, and there's some people that could make the argument, and I'm not totally sold on this, that Brian Robinson might be the most important person on this offense right now, even more important than Jayden. Now, listen, I always think the quarterback, obviously, because of the sheer nature of the position and the cerebral nature of the position, has to probably be given that credit. But B-Rob, look, they were able to run against the Giants, a team that has given up a ton of rushing yards, quite honestly, to a bunch of offenses, and twice now to Washington. Once with B-Rob, once without. They weren't able to run against Pittsburgh, with the exception of the short yardage goal-to-go stuff, where they actually had 3 touchdown runs, and they were physical runs, but they weren't able to run, I guess, outside of the 10s, for lack of a better term. I need to see better when we're not talking about goal-to-goal situations, which is it's different beast, right? Philadelphia's really good goal to go. I need to see better commitment, better I guess better results, of course. And guys, I would just say this, just because you throw or because you run and maybe you take a negative on first down, and you're behind 2nd and 10, some people are going to tell you that's the worst. You can't do that, this, that, and the other thing. I don't play that, because they tried to throw a couple of screens out to De'Ami Brown last week on early downs. I think one was on first and one was on second, and he was running from Landover to Bethesda and negative 13 yards combined on 2 catches. So did that really help you, or did that hurt you? So just because you pass doesn't mean you're automatically going to solve the offense. I think you have to stay with it. I think as long as B-Rob is healthy, I think, and even if B-Rob gets banged up, right? Find a way to just slow them down a little bit and get them thinking, hey, we're not one-dimensional and you can't just tee off.
I love it. It's classic Rooster in emphasizing the run game. Exactly, 100%. I love that right there. Chris, you kind of alluded to kind of ball control offense, keeping the Eagles offense off the field. Who's a bigger threat? Who's more important to shut down this week? Saquon Barkley or A.J. Brown? Much below. It's a tough question. Pick your poison there. We see BSJ's had a lot of – he's maligned in the media, being kind of addressed. I'm kind of curious who's a bigger threat to you this game.
To me, it's Saquon Barkley's the bigger
I agree.
threat,
Mhm.
but I would also say this because A.J. Brown can rip up 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 yards
Yeah.
per reception, and not every reception, but you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Maybe a little bit more than Barkley can because, just again, the way football works. And yeah, it's not to say that he can't rip off big chunk runs. Of course he can. But it's more likely that big chunk plays are going to come from a receiver,
Mhm.
especially one as good as A.J. Brown. But
Mm.
that being said, you know, this is the problem with this game for me. I think you guys would agree, right? Like last week and against Baltimore a couple of weeks ago, they dropped down that safety, playing more 8 in the box, right? Did a good job stopping the run. They did a good job stopping the run in the first half against Baltimore when they had the dual threat of both Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. Again, that dual threat is back this week with Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts. But on top of that, then you throw on A.J. Brown, who I think is better than Zay Flowers. And Zay Flowers killed Washington in that first half, and then that forced an adjustment. So, if they commit an 8th guy in the box, which we saw them do last week, which we saw them do again the first half against Baltimore, does A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Jahan Dotson, do they take advantage of that over the top and kill them and then soften up the box and make you drop the 2 safeties back? And then do they get after it with the runs underneath? So, I mean, it's going to be this chess game, and you got to figure out, like, okay, how do we play that? How do we deploy that? I think they'll probably play softer in coverage, is my guess. I don't know. Just to kind of try and keep everything in front of them and make plays on the ball, gang tackle, try and do stuff like that to not get beat over the top or to not get killed with a light box, and take your chances that, hey man, if we make them go 8, 9, 10 plays, they'll turn the ball over or take a penalty or do something stupid, or Nick
Mm.
Sirianni will, go for it on 4th and 4 when he should just kick a field goal with Jake Elliott.
Mm.
Between your radio show and George and I on social media, we got a pretty good idea, I think, of how the fan base feels. I think there's a lot of people that are at least confused by Marshon Lattimore. I think he played the game before he was traded. He gets here, he hadn't played. I appreciate they want him to get healthy, but I think there's a lot of people in the fan base saying, well, I thought he was here for a playoff run. What's going on here? Do you have kind of a theory on what's going on with Lattimore?
Well, yeah, besides Doug, that they want him to be as close to 100% as they possibly can, and for it not to go, sideways on them if they rush him back. I mean, that would be one logical theory, right? That would
True.
make the most sense. The other part of it, and this is my problem with the Thursday night games and the Monday night games and the short
Yeah.
weeks and all that, going from Sunday to Saturday, is you have less practice time, you have less recovery time, right? People talk about, oh, there's no more injuries in Thursday night games than there are in Sunday. There's less players that are able to play and get ready
Yeah.
and get back. And I think that, combined with maybe the hamstring injury was a little more severe than a lot of people from New Orleans, and a lot of people here were kind of wondering, oh, well, he was just, faking it to get out of New Orleans. Maybe he was, but it appears like it's a little bit more balky. And on top of that, again, the short week compression, I didn't think he was going to play against Pittsburgh. So that didn't surprise me. This one surprised me a little bit when he
Me
couldn't get
too.
on the
I
practice
agree.
field. And here we are. He's not going to play, obviously. Now, you hope he can play next week, and you hope he can take CeeDee Lamb and whatever's remaining of the Dallas Cowboys out of it. But I don't even know if I sit here on Thursday afternoon and say that's a guarantee. I can't say that because, A, hamstring injuries are obviously tricky, and B, because they might be saying, you know what, this is, again, not only a this year investment, this is also a 2-year plus investment. And we don't want to get on a bad foot, rush him back if he's not right, if he's not comfortable physically, mentally, emotional, what have you. We'd rather have him for those December games down the stretch.
The fact that he didn't play this week makes me feel like maybe we underappreciated the play Adams Peters was making for not just now, but for the long term. He's often said, right, we're not going to give away right now for the long
Mm-hmm.
term. But it felt like when they accelerated, the fan base was like, oh, this is a move for right now. The guy with another 2 years after this year left of control on his contract. Maybe we didn't realize the hand that Adam was playing.
I've tried to think about this, and I don't know how you guys feel, but like, I mean, I look. I was a big fan of the move. I didn't realize that maybe the hamstring was maybe as bad as it is. But and I understand what they're trying to do, trying to preserve and protect, right? I, I was disappointed all year, especially when Michael Davis got benched after the week 2 performance against Malik Neighbors. And we knew that Emmanuel Forbes was at the very minimum going to be up and down, if not really down, which
Down.
here we are. Um, I was kind of disappointed that they weren't more aggressive in getting veteran help before even the deadline, right? Even before getting Lattimore, trying to shore up that position. And I know their pass defense hasn't been the problem. I got it. But trying to, again, account for, okay, we thought we had this, meaning Davis and Forbes, and really we don't have that. So now we have to get something better, right? And of course, again, to ask St. Juice to be the number one corner is probably not a fair thing. I know it's the NFL and you don't get paid for fair or unfair. It is what it is, right? Tonight he's going to have to go against A.J. Brown pretty much all game, most of the game, you would think, right? And he's probably going to get burnt. But, like I was surprised that they weren't a little bit more aggressive in addressing the cornerback situation even before the Lattimore deal. And then if you make the Lattimore deal and you think, well, wait a second, this might be a 2-3 week thing, then did they know that at the time, or did they have to agree to the deal, trade the compensation, whatever, and then get him into the facility to determine truly whether he was going to be ready to play for either last Sunday or tonight or even next Sunday or when?
Just a quick follow-up question to that, Chris. When Lattimore is healthy, I know they won't say it. Put your prognostication hat on. What do you think the secondary looks like when Lattimore comes out? You get Mikey Sainristil back into the nickel and St. Jude stays outside, or has Sainristil been effective enough that you leave him there and play Igbenogany inside?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sanders still has been effective enough, especially after the rough start. I mean, he's so physical, so feisty. Like, I think he probably is going to do a pretty good job against Devontae Smith tonight, who I know is a little bit banged up. I don't really worry about that matchup as much as, obviously you worry about, again, can A.J. Brown take the lid off of St. Just a couple of times or one time or in a big spot or whatever. So I think ultimately it will be when Marshon Lattimore is ready to go, whenever that is, and hopefully it's next Sunday, Lattimore and St. Just on the outside, and then Mikey Sanders still on the inside, and then you have Igbenogany, who can play inside and outside and basically becomes your top reserve, in game or week to week, depending on injuries and depending on other situations. And maybe that's not like great, and you go, oh, we feel, awesome, but Davis and or Forbes, maybe both, will be available as well in case, like you really need something emergency wise. But I think that's probably the plan. And I think that's probably how it's going to work. Sanders still, guys, this. I mean, he struggled the first 2 weeks in terms of coverage. I think, just everything kind of getting his feet. Like since that point, I mean, he'll give up some stuff, but I mean, he's such a fierce competitor, such a good tackler. And how many times have we seen him wrap around somebody and just lasso them down and just wheel them down to the ground, right? The kid's got tenacity and onions that are like grapefruits, right? And so to me, ideally, I could use that outside, certainly, but I also like that inside against smaller, quicker, shiftier receivers as long as he can keep up with them, which I think he'll be able to do in most cases. And that's just the way I see it. Now, again, I could be wrong. To me, St. Just, like, I know it's so easy to pick on the guy. He was in a really tough bind last week against Williams, and I know Mike Williams getting blown past by him is not a good look, but Mike Williams has been a productive receiver, right? But the problem for me, guys, on that particular play was, it's 3rd and 9. He's playing at the 10-yard. He's playing basically at the sticks. He's trying not to give up a first down, but while trying not to give up a first down, he gives up the big play. And he was kind of in a bind because the safety had to drop down to cover the leaking receiver out of the backfield. And that meant that he didn't have safety help on that side of the field over the top to help him with Mike Williams. So, I mean, you had this, like, I don't know. I choose to think it was like a really good design by Pittsburgh. And certainly BSJ could have played it better, but he was kind of in a pickle and kind of in a bind, and it got exposed.
It's difficult with Benjamin Sanchez. People that are much smarter than me, Logan Paulson, talked about how he had a pretty great game for the most part. He was playing run support, had some pretty good coverage, but gave up big plays when it mattered. That's what people remember, unfortunately, with Sanchez. Chris, like you, I heard your score prediction on the radio while I was driving up here. I think it's going to be a nip and tuck game. I'm concerned about special teams. Maybe I'm kind of overlooking things or overanalyzing things. Austin Cyber sitting out this week. We have Zane Gonzalez coming out. Last we saw Zacchaeus catching the punt returns. He bobbled 2 of them. Are you concerned going into the game with special teams? And have you heard anything about potentially having a different punt return this week?
Yeah, I am concerned. I mentioned it in the, I think, 2:00 hour.
Okay.
Talked about it. Not only Cyber, but and Zacchaeus, but also just if Ballore can't play, right? And I don't think that's
official. It's a tackler. Yeah, I think he's about to be out. I think I heard that.
Yeah,
actually.
I think he's expected to be out, but I don't know if that's official until we get the actual inactives. But I'm assuming that he'll be out. Cyber, we know, is out. To me, punt and kick return has been really good for the most part this year for the Commanders. They cannot afford to give up a big one to Gainwell or who's the punt returner that I'm thinking about for Philadelphia. It'll come to my brain probably too late. But the point being, I think Cooper DeJean is doing most of their punts, right? So to me, it's a bad sign if you see like a long return, 40, 50 yards, somewhere like that, where it gives obviously the Eagles great field position, but also it gets the crowd fired up, momentum. It almost feels like if you're a good offense, you have to score. You should score when they give a gift like that, right? And we saw, early on in the year, right, the first game and change, their special teams, it took them a little while to figure out. Since then, it's been really good. They cannot allow a coverage breakdown. And obviously, with Zacchaeus, right? Here's the thing that worries me about Zacchaeus. After the 2 punts last week, he did not field another punt one.
Yeah.
Which I'm okay with if that prevents a mistake. But here's the bigger thing. It's four punt mistakes in the last 4 games. He misjudged a punt badly, I thought, against Carolina, and it caused a wild scramble, and the ball was down at the 1 yard line.
Yeah, I remember that actually.
He fumbled a pretty good punt return against Chicago the next week, and they got it back. And then the 2 last week, and the first one, I think he just like misjudged, and he kind of squeezed almost like the wrong side of the football, the wrong end of the football. And then the other one, I guess, what went off his visor, his neck, or whatever it was. I didn't talk to him this week. I'm sure he'll bounce back, but man,
do they have any other options? Because I know like Jameson Crowder's on IR, so we're not going to necessarily use him.
So
why don't they put Eckler back there? Maybe Eckler, I guess, because B-Rob was out last week and they wanted to preserve him for running, I guess.
Right. So Eckler probably could do that, but again, it depends on how much you want to, because he's already doing the kickoff returns, and obviously he's still, even with B-Rob out, he's still going to play a factor as a runner and mostly, hopefully, as a receiver. Luke McCaffrey is an intriguing option, right? I think he did 1 punt return during the preseason, and he did some of it, of course, during training camp and throughout the offseason. But, again, it's been probably a little while, although we don't know what they did in practice this week. And Igbenogany might be another guy that you can kind of keep an eye on. It really hurts to not have it, at least the safe hands, you think, of Jamison Crowder as an option, because now Zacchaeus, again, it's not just twice, it's not just last week, but it's 4 incidents over the last month, and to me that's scary. And the one thing I know is, and this goes for Zane Gonzalez too, this team cannot lose this game on special teams, right? If they're going to have any chance to win, you can't lose the game on special teams, if that makes sense.
Giants fans all over my timeline, Chris, are talking about how one player can't make a difference. Listen, Jayden Daniels has showed us what one guy can do to change the direction of a franchise. Games like this don't feel like they're too big for him because he's done this in the SEC. While I get it's not the same, those night games down in Death Valley were serious business.
Oh yeah.
I'm curious your thoughts on George and I have discussed this before. What maybe you had wrong about Jayden Daniels before he got here that has surprised you since you've been able to be around him a little bit?
That's a great question. I knew he was mature and poised. I did not think it was possible to be as mature and poised and hardworking and
Yeah.
dedicated and level-headed and down to earth. You're talking to a guy. Obviously, I covered Robert day in, day out, and I've covered a lot of other quarterbacks too. And I don't want to, besmirch anybody that's no longer with us, but when a guy is a hard worker and is a leader and is a mature dude and all of that stuff. So I'll give you a little story. I don't know if you guys saw this, but we all know about Sam Cosmi making a speech in the locker room last Sunday. So I was with Johnny Newton as he first started talking after getting dressed in the locker room, and as he was taking total fault and responsibility, but I think Sam Fortier, the Post, asked him, "Hey man, like what did your teammates and coaches say?" And he was talking about the brotherhood and how they all had his back and whatever. And literally at that moment that he's saying that, up walks Jayden Daniels, not like to put on a show, not for the cameras, because there was only two of us there. And I wasn't even shooting video through my stupid cell phone, right? We were just talking to the guy, and he high fives him and he says, we got you. We
Yeah.
got you. Right. I asked Jayden about that, and it's not like he was like, oh, I wanted to show I'm a leader and I'm a captain and I'm a this, I'm a that. He's just like, just wanted to prove, want everybody to know that, whatever the narrative outside of the building, it's different inside the building. This brotherhood thing that they all talk about, it is real, it is true, and whatever. And so I guess I wasn't counting that as much as I should have. The other thing that, again, long answer, sorry. I wonder, like Linnell and I talked about this on the show on Thursday. I wonder, like this virtual reality, which we've heard so much about, does that help him? And I never really thought about this, so I don't know what you guys will think. Does that help him more against zone defenses than maybe man, or against zone defenses, which traditionally coaches like to play, especially against young and rookie quarterbacks, because it's so hard to figure out, okay, where's this guy going? Where's this guy coming from? Where's this window? Where's that angle? So I wonder if the virtual reality thing helps him overall, of course, but if it helps him more than traditional young and rookie quarterbacks have been helped before, because it allows him to see different things that he just wasn't able to see and just isn't able to see in the limited practice time. So that's another thing. And then the last thing, and I apologize, I do wonder if he, not only is he still...
Chris, that's you. Okay. Your mic's going.
Oh, sorry. You guys got me now?
Yeah, but
the
headphones, there you go. Yeah, the headphones were just real static.
Sorry. I talk too much with my hands. I'm Italian, my bad. But I do wonder, like, if
Chris, it's so bad. We can't hear you. Yeah, something's going on with your connection there.
There you go. Oh, you're
Now
muted
it's
now.
I will say, while Chris is figuring this out, that I think that it speeds. They say that they can speed it up. So I think speeding it up greatly helps him. And I've often heard that it's on the quarterback to figure out the zones, and it's on players to get open in man. So I could see where being able to see those zones and the holes over and over again would be productive for Jayden. I think it's fascinating. We don't hear a lot of the other quarterbacks using it, so I'm not sure if it's a league-wide thing or not.
I lost you, Doug. I lost your video, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's weird. Maybe it was me.
Maybe it's you potentially. I'm not sure. I did hear the static as well. Yeah, but going to that point, I heard Linnell and Chris while I was driving back from the gym. Linnell talked about how with zone coverage, it's just more confusing for a rookie quarterback. It can disguise coverages, it can mix and match coverages, and it might be more difficult. Well, I kind of agree with Chris's point where if it's man coverage, obviously the virtual reality altogether basically is an issue altogether. But I'm losing everybody here. But I do think the zone coverage is definitely more easy to disguise.
Can you guys hear me now?
And you sound crystal clear. You're good. Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that. I apologize. Just technology just bites you in the, you know what?
No worries. Doug's gone too, so I don't know what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Can you at least hear me?
Yeah.
You sound perfect.
We can hear you,
good.
Doug.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I don't know. I do wonder we know about the ribs, right? And we know that's probably still a little bit of an issue, maybe in game as the game goes along, what have you, depending on shots that he takes and whatever. And by shots, I don't mean medical shots, I mean football shots. But the thing that I kept thinking about this week, and maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree, guys, 6 weeks of training camp in the preseason, right?
It's a long season.
And then 10 weeks in a row of football. So we're on week 16 right now. At LSU, at Arizona, they get at least 2 buys usually in that time span. So he could be hitting a little bit of that proverbial rookie wall, just mentally, physically, emotionally, everything that he's been through. I don't know that. It's probably more the ribs and the lack of B-Rob and the offensive line being banged up and all that. But I do think that is something that maybe is a possibility.
That's a great point, actually, Chris, because if you think about it, the college game slate, it's about 10 or 12 games, right? 12 or 13 games max. We're approaching that right now. We're at a game coming up to week 10. We're almost at a full season where this is going to be the longest Jayden's ever played with that physical contact there. So definitely that's a great point.
Well, it's not only that, but it's also the training camp, right? 5.5 weeks of 3. Well, he only played in the 2 preseason games, but you got to practice, right? It's a long when you don't have a bye until as late as they do for the 3rd consecutive year, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know this because I've tracked it, because Army Navy falls like every year, and I go to that and I do that. So I'm traveling that weekend usually too. So it's the 3rd consecutive week, and that means, or 3rd consecutive year, that means bye doesn't come until like early to somewhat mid-ish December. When you factor in again the start of training camp, late July, all the way until early to mid-ish December, that's a long grind for anyone, never mind a rookie who's never done it at this level and at this volume and quantity so far.
So, Chris, quick question for you. I love asking people that are feet on the ground, that are at the park, that are interacting with everybody. I think the 7-2 start at the beginning of the year was completely, it's unexpected. I don't think anyone expected us to kind of have that hot of a start. I'm just curious in your perspective, like, why is this year different? Like, what happened over in Washington? Was it simply Jayden Daniels is that shooting star? He really elevated the entire offense? Is it Adam Peters' eye for talent? Is it the culture that Dan Quinn kind of brought about? Is it Cliff Kingsbury's offensive scheme? I know it's very easy to say all of it, but is there one or two is it really easy to kind of put into one of them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say yes, all of that, right? Okay. But if I had to pick one, I mean, look, I know Sam Howell tried, and I know Eric Bieniemy thought he was doing the right thing, but that whole operation being more run-oriented, even though at times Cliff has gotten away from it, I think, and maybe abandoning it too early, and so on. I think that's been like the major catalyst to just stabilizing things, not putting everything on the defense, which clearly is not equipped to handle everything, and not many are, and the ability to control the clock at times, the ability to obviously score points, even though they've struggled at times in the red zone, all of that kind of making it easier for the offensive line, which again wasn't as bad as everybody thought. You guys know that last year, but I'm not saying it was good, but it just wasn't as bad. It wasn't horrendous. Like, all of that has, I think, leveled the playing field out and given them an edge. Then you look at, you say, all right, what is the DNA of this team? And the DNA of this team, I think, and maybe this sounds corny, I don't know, this whole brotherhood thing that they throw out, I do believe in that, but there is a certain belief that I don't think this organization had, certainly the last couple of years, inside the building and inside the locker room. Like, they would talk, they would say things, but they didn't back it up. I don't know if they believed it. I don't even know if Ron believed it. Like, Ron was trying to say things, but a lot of it was like diarrhea coming out of somebody's mouth, right? Or someplace worse. I think Dan Quinn and Adam, and I remember, guys, when Adam Peters was hired and introduced, and I knew Dan Quinn was coming when he said, I want a leader of men.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say that. Adam Peters meant that, and he also had the connection with Dan Quinn from Kyle Shanahan. Kyle was more instrumental in this than people realize. Okay. Dan has told me that specifically on the record. So, I mean, I'm not making that up. That being said, I think, I think, it's kind of a combination, of course, of what I talked about with the quarterback and the offensive coordinator and the game planning and all that stuff, but also that belief that you're not just talking and answering questions, you believe it, you live it, you eat it, you consume it, you sleep it, you do everything with it, and I think that, and maybe we'll find out tonight how strong that will is, because if they find a way to win this game, however they find a way, that's going to be the big national narrative.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Chris, I thought maybe you could help us put a little parlay together here to wrap up the show. I've got some over-unders that we can go through.
I don't know if you want me giving anybody gambling advice, but I will do my best.
It's all a crapshoot anyway, Chris. It's all good. Just have fun with it. We're all good.
Jalen Hurts, 225.5 passing yards, over-under.
I'm gonna say under.
I'm going over on that one. Under. I'm going over personally. Under 220. I'm writing this down.
I understand, George, but it was a difficult decision for me, but I'm going to say under because there's another part to this.
I think I know where you're going to go with this. Okay, I got you.
Over under 226.5 passing yards for Daniels.
I'm going to say over tonight, but barely over. I think it'll be a better passing night and hopefully pass catching night for the Commanders than it was last Sunday.
Jalen Hurts, 40.5 rushing yards.
See, this is where I go, okay, I think they're going to struggle, and maybe Jalen doesn't have to throw as much, and it's because he extends plays and because they miss opportunities like the Cowboys missed on that pass to Dallas Goedert, I think second quarter of last week, where they had a blitz and they came off the edge and they had him lined up and they had an arm around him, and Jalen Hurts broke away from it and fires a touchdown pass. Maybe he runs it tonight. Maybe if it's in the red zone, that's where he's most dangerous, but I would say over on that. And again, I'll go a little under on the passing yards.
42.5 rushing yards for Jayden.
I'm going to go under on that.
Okay.
I mean, I do think there's something to the ribs during the game as the game goes on, still bothering him a little bit.
I thought this was an interesting one. These are all from Underdog here. They've got Robinson Jr. over under 45.5 rushing yards. Feels like a gimme.
I'm going to go over on that. I feel good about that. I mean, here's hoping that hamstring holds up, because guys, if it doesn't, and worst case scenario, it's not only he can't finish this game, but it's something way worse and a tear or something like that. Obviously, as we saw with Dak Prescott, right? And that could be a season-ending injury.
Yep.
This is the biggest problem for me of the night. Is Saquon Barkley, 113.5 yards over under.
Yeah.
That's a big number, and I still feel like he could get to the over on that thing.
And that's the other part of what I was, kind of mentioning when I went under on Jalen. I do too think that, Saquon can 120, 125. And by the way, if he does 120, 125, as long as, one of them is not a 50-yard explosive, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, right? If he has to work it out, grind it out, and slow the game down a little bit, 4 or 5 yards a pop, if they run the ball Philadelphia 35 times, right, and maybe Saquon, rushes 22, 23, 24 times, somewhere in that range, and it's 4 and 5 yards, kind of garden variety runs without a lack of I think you live with that, and I think you just say, hey, man, it's Saquon Barkley, and it's a really good offensive line. He didn't kill us. He hurt us, but he didn't kill us.
Another interesting one I thought here, they've got Terry McLaurin's receptions at 4.5. Feel like he could easily be over that one, right?
I say over too. I mean, he's most likely to draw Quinyon Mitchell. Quinyon Mitchell. I want to call him Quinyon Mitchell all the time.
That's must-see TV tonight.
Right. And Quinyon is a terrific young corner, obviously. But, we all know what kind of year Terry's having. And I think even though he didn't score a touchdown last week, just the kind of routes that they ran, the kind of modified slants, getting him in space, getting him in a window that maybe is tough for a rookie corner to stay with, and maybe the safety to drop down over the top and bracket coverage or whatever. Maybe if they can hit 1 or 2 of those, Terry could easily go over, what did you say it was, Doug? Is
4.5 receptions.
4.5 receptions.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I'd like to see, I'd like to see them go back to him a little bit more inside the red zone, right? And especially goal to go, where the Eagles are really good. The Eagles are really good goal to go. To me, Terry runs those slant routes again, and he's just, I don't know, like during training camp, and we haven't seen it as much during the regular season, but he and Jayden had this connection along the outer boundaries of the end zone, not necessarily just on fades, but just balls along the, along the outer sideline, if you will. And I wonder if that's an area that maybe you could break down this Eagles defense a little bit in.
I'd like to see them get back to getting him in the screen game just a little bit more. It felt like the first couple of weeks he was more involved in that screen game. They've got A.J. Brown, 82.5 receiving yards.
Ooh.
George is pounding the over, it looks like.
I think A.J. Brown's going to have a monster game today. I'm worried about it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't know about monster game. I listen, the last time we were here, he did against Emmanuel Forbes. St. Just is going to give up some catches. He's going to give up some yards, and he's probably going to give up a touchdown. But I think you're going to get a better performance from St. Just than most fans are thinking, one, and two, certainly than they got out of Forbes against A.J. Brown last year.
That's a fair point.
Better chance of getting an interception, Quinyon Mitchell or St. Just?
Well, Quinyon Mitchell.
Yeah, absolutely.
But St. Just has only got one in his career now. He did have one taken away because of a penalty against Kirk Cousins that would have won them probably a game and would have been a pick six and whatever. But, I mean, we all know he doesn't, listen, I like St. Just. I think he's held in a lot of disregard by this fan base, and sometimes that's understandable. Penalties, grabs, doesn't get his head turned around, all that stuff. But I mean, if we stop looking at him as a number one corner, maybe we say, look, he's doing his best. I mean, you don't get participation trophies, but maybe our expectations just shouldn't be as high, especially against upper level elite wide receivers.
If I had said Sainristil instead of St. Just, would it have changed your answer?
That's a great question. I'm going to go with yes. Sainristil, I think, would be more likely to have an interception than Quinyon Mitchell. If it was Sainristil, yeah, I think I'd go there.
You mentioned Carmi earlier in the program. I saw him on one of your videos from the Best Buddies event. Pretty cool.
Awesome. Yeah, that was that was amazing. I'm still 2 weeks later. I'm like, wow, did that really happen? Sam and his wife Blair have been unbelievable, in this whole process. She has a special needs background, and Sam was involved in that, even before. And I take you guys back to last training camp. Nick Gates, who's actually a backup, for the Eagles here, and who obviously struggled in his lone season in Washington. Brought my kid onto the, Tyler onto the field at training camp, and Carmi was involved in that, and so was Terry, and so was so many other people. So I don't want to, leave anybody out, but that really kind of triggered a relationship, and kind of like a more of a personal relationship per se than a football relationship. Yeah. And then I met Blair, his wife, at training camp, and I was just like, I just want you to know how cool your husband was to do that. And she's like, oh my God. She's like, I remember that. I heard about that. I love, working with kids with special needs and young adults with special needs. And then that just started a relationship between all of us. And the next thing I know, they were in at a gala with us, and I was sitting at a table with them, and they were just making an unbelievable, guys. I'm telling you, there probably wasn't a dry eye in the house when both of them spoke. It was great.
That's really good.
I must be honest, Chris, I did not listen to your show today because I wanted to have a fresh mind as we sat here. So I
wouldn't listen to my show either, Doug.
No. Regular listener. Tell me what you had the score prediction for us today.
So I went, ultimately, and I hope I'm wrong. 27-23 Birds. I look, there's no.
I picked Birds too, by the way, so don't feel bad.
there's no insult in losing to the Philadelphia Eagles on a short week when you're banged up
at home
on the road.
On the
there's
road,
there's no insult in that.
I think that's right.
This is not about like, oh, Jayden stinks or Jayden's this or the team stinks or the team's about to go in the toilet bowl. Hey man, you're still 7-4. You're still 7-4. And if I would have told you play 11 games without a bye, rookie quarterback, new regime, 70% of the roster, and if I would have told you 7-4 at not the end of November, but midway through November, you would take that and run to the bank. So as long as you have the proper perspective, I don't want to see them get blown out, but if they lose a tight game, I don't know how anybody could be mad about that. Frustrated? Sure. Wanting more? Sure. And that's not loser talk. That's not loser mentality. That's not anything other than just let's be realistic. This is still a team that's trying to not only rebuild and reload and recalibrate, as Dan likes to talk about, but also still trying to, find exactly itself. And remember, the roster, is still nowhere near where it needs to be among the upper echelon elite, Detroit, Philadelphia, Kansas City, all of that. Buffalo.
Thank you, buddy. We appreciate your time. Enjoy the game tonight and have a safe trip back to DC.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you. Big fan of both of you, and sorry for talking so much, and sorry for the microphone going out. But I appreciate you guys, and have a great night. Okay.
You're always welcome, Chris. We love you, man. See you, man.
Thanks, buddy.